Hey everybody, it's Mark Pattison. I am back. I am prepping within days of going up and over to Nepal en route to Mount Everest. I'm very jacked up about that, and I want everybody, if you're interested, to go on to my website, www.markpattisonnfl, and there's a tab called Everest Blog, and two things. You can see as much as I will be able to do to give updated what's going on the mountain. And the other part is a really cool Garmin app, InReach Mini series, that it actually tracks me going up and down the mountain. You can see my every movement as I try to get to the top safely and back down on the other end. So again, if you want to check that out, www.markpattisonnfl.com. And of course, we always love ratings and reviews. It helps to elevate the game, the awareness, and the inspiration to all these different really great and amazing people that I have on the pod. Okay, so today I want to introduce my guest, Alan Arnette. And Alan is a guy I had on about 50 episodes ago, it seems like, and he's a very accomplished mountaineer, number one. Number two, he has been on so many of the most amazing mountains around the world, including Mount Everest, I believe 4 times, of which he summited his 4th time, ran into other issues the 3 times prior to that. Has been on other big mountains like K2, has climbed with the guy I'll be climbing with, Garrett Madison, and he has a really, really outstanding blog that is super informative. So first, Alan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, great to be back, Mark. Thanks.
Yeah. Listen, you were fantastic the first time I talked to you, and I have secretly stalked you ever since because of the great information. And just so I get this out in front, what is the name of your website where you keep this great data, really historical data on all this different stuff around the world?
Yeah, it's just my name, alanarnette.com.
That's great.
ALANARNETTE.com.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, and we'll go back to that again at the end of this pod. So, I'm in the process right now. So I'm going to give out the date. The date that this podcast is actually being aired is a date in the future. It's before I leave, which is March 31st. I'll have to figure that out exactly when we'll plug this in. But I'm sitting here talking to you on the 4th of March, okay? And a lot of this, I'm tapping into your expertise. I'm busy packing. I've got this 4-page laundry list of all the different things I need on the mountain. And I think the wild card into this year, which makes it unique from any other time, I think, that I can remember in history, is that we've got this awful virus that's out spreading around the world called coronavirus. And the other day when I was sitting back, it really captured my attention on something that you had written because of all the cancellations, not just conferences and meetings and going to the grocery store and going to sporting events, but also many of the different climbers. So I want to start with that in terms of, let's just deal with it. Let's talk about coronavirus and what you're seeing out there right now.
Yeah, it's it's obviously a global tragedy with getting close to 100,000 cases and close to over 3,000 people have lost their lives to this disease. So it's certainly not something to ignore or to make light of. There was a similar experience back in 2002 with the SARS virus. It was a similar upper respiratory virus, and just so happened that I did go to Everest in 2002. That was my first time, and it was smack dab in the middle of the SARS. And I remember, walking through the airports. I think I connected through Bangkok, and and having my temperature taking and an infrared scan of my face to see if I had fever or not. Wow. So I guess there is a precedent for this. And that year, nothing really happened at base camp, which is certainly what we hope will happen this year. But the concern, Mark, that I think everybody should have that's going to Everest, and we'll just stay focused on the very narrow area of Everest relative to this virus, is that base camp on both sides is a very intimate environment. And then the camp itself, Garrett Madison runs an outstanding base camp. So I have no doubt that, things like hygiene and all of that will be doubled and tripled up in terms of washing hands and washing dishes and those type of things. But all it takes is one person to get sick. It was 3 years ago that the common flu had an outbreak on the Nepal side, and practically everybody at camp got that. And it actually took out a number of climbers that year.
Wow.
So this stuff does happen, and it's an environment where diseases spread very, very quickly. So if one person comes in that has it, It could take out everybody at camp. By taking out, I mean in the season, everybody have to go home.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously that's not what I want. That's not what anybody wants when we go over there. One of the things, I mean, I don't know how you characterize this. I started to call this a benefit, but certainly never at the cost of somebody else. But many people live by fear. And the reality is that 350,000 to 400,000 people die every year of the flu from influenza. And so we're still haven't reached, those types of numbers, but I think it's just the unknown that's out there. And for me personally, I'm not going to play that game. I 100% going, no turning back. But one of the things that you'd written in your post the other day was that I'm not sure if it's the north side, the China controlled side, but lots of expedition parties and climbers, they're now seeing cancellations, which just means less people, less traffic on the mountain.
Yeah, so it looks like when in my survey of the various operators that the so-called foreign operators or the Western operators like Adventure Consultants out of New Zealand or Garrett Madison out of the U.S., International Mountain Guides, that class, they're not currently seeing alpenglow. They're not seeing any cancellations, but apparently the Nepali companies who tend to cater more to the Eastern clients in Japan, Korea, China, India, they are seeing some pretty strong cancellations. And as a result, I was forecasting this year that we were going to see over 1,000 total summits. Last year, we approached that. We were in the 970 range on both sides, all routes, all people. This year, I think it's going to be half of what it was last year. I think we're looking more at like 600. The number of permits, I think, are going to be on the Chinese side cut in half. I only think we're going to see about 50 members and then an additional 50 support people. So maybe 100 total on the Tibet side. And on the Nepal side, instead of the normal 1,000 that's at base camp, I think that this year we'll probably see close to maybe 500 or 600, which translates into maybe 250, maybe 300 at the most that'll summit. And that's compared to the over 600 that summited last year. So, from that perspective, people have been talking about the commercialization and how crowded the mountain is and how many inexperienced people are there. And, I don't know, maybe this is Mother Nature or the universe helping us correct a situation that we won't correct ourselves.
Yeah. So last year, so let's dive into that. So when this is 2019, last year in January, I was down in Antarctica climbing, and my tent mate was Don Cash. And I've brought this story up, many times. And Don, when we were down there, a great guy, big family, Mormon family out of Salt Lake City. And he just seemed like it was more about wearing the t-shirt and doing, he had this do epic shit saying that he was always talking about and wearing this t-shirt. And, and I've said many times on this show that, and these aren't just words, this is real, real stuff, which is, I just love the process. I love being in the mountains. I know you do too, because I see posts all the time. You're marching all over the Rocky Mountains there in Colorado. And, same thing here in Sun Valley. And I just didn't get that same feeling. And you could see the way he climbed. And again, I'm not trying to pick on him, but, what it really got down to, it was a person who took 19 hours to get to the top. I was tracking him on his Garmin InReach Mini that he had. And, he got to the top, raised his hand and fell over. And what also came out of that was these low cost operators that you were just mentioning. And so I don't know, I guess at the end of the day, it's a benefit, but, really trying to cut back on the people who just at the end of the day should not be there. Right.
Yeah, and that's the phrase I've been using. I've been talking about this and writing about this ever since really 2014. And that's when we saw an inflection point where the majority of the people that were guided on Everest were guided by Nepali-owned companies. Prior to that, the majority were guided by the foreign company, the Western companies. And what happened was that in 2012 on Manaslu, there was an avalanche and it killed over 10 Sherpas. And then in 14, of course, there was the Serac release off the west shoulder of Everest, and that killed 8 to 16 Sherpas in the icefall. And so the Sherpas began to say, look, if we're going to be here risking our lives and working for the man, then let's cut out the middleman, because we have as much experience as they do now, which which was not an incorrect statement. If you go back to Hall and Ball back in the early '90s with Adventure Consultants, it was Gary and Rob that were fixing ropes along with a couple of Sherpas like Andorje Sherpa. But now you've got the Sherpas that they're running Everest basically, and we've always been the guest in their country, and now they're just taking over and running it. So now it's 80% of the clients are guided by these Nepali companies, and they've cut out the middleman, they've cut out the Western guides. So as a result, they're competing primarily on price because their cost structure is so much low, and as a result, that's attracting a new class of clientele, people that don't have the experience, and they are going for the T-shirt in many cases.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that it's not about the Sherpa Nepalese guides and support. It's really about, since they're offering such low money, it's attracting people who really shouldn't be on the mountain. Right?
Yeah, I've got a friend that flies for one of the low-cost airlines, and he compares it to, that the people that get on his airplane, half the time they've never flown before. So when, they actually have to pay attention to fasten your seatbelt, where those of us that traveled for a living for all of our lives, we ignore the safety briefing. So it's the same thing, that people that are on the mountain, one of the other problems is that there's an arrogance associated with it, because the press has for years, especially after Into Thin Air came out in the late '90s, just demonized the mountain. They think it's so easy to go up and down it. There's a McDonald's at the top, there's a Starbucks at Camp 2, and on and on and on. And so you read that anybody can summit Everest, and anybody can go. You pay typically the line I always read is you pay your $65,000 and a Sherpa hauls your ass to the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's just, it couldn't be further from the truth, as evidenced by last year when 11 people lost their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible. I will put in about 500,000, literally 500,000 vertical feet between coming off of Vinson, living here in Sun Valley, and having mountains across the street to run up and down every single day. And, it just brings me joy and happiness. And when I don't do it, I feel like I've left something, at the table. I haven't done enough work. And I know at some point in time, and this has happened to you numerous times up on Everest, where you've just run into a wall, and things will happen. I will run into a wall. And so my whole thing is all about, what can I do to best position myself, to put myself in the best place to, survive and make it through that tough point.
Yeah, Mark, I think that I had this consulting business called Summit Coach, where I consult with people. I don't sell any products, but just information based upon an experience about how to prepare and go and what to expect. And one of the first things I spend time with a new client on is, what is their motivation? And we talk about that exact point you just raised, hitting the wall. It's mile 23 in the marathon. Yeah. And when you're up there at 3:00 in the morning, going up the triangular face to the balcony from the South Col, and it's 20 degrees below zero, and the wind's gusting to 40 miles an hour, and you're threading that weather window, and every single part of your essence is screaming at you to turn around, but you're going, no, I'm not going to turn around because I have worked so hard to get here, and I know I can do this. But every single part of your body is just screaming. Your legs are screaming. Your lungs are screaming. Your heart tells you that keep going, but your mind says turn around. You've got to know what your motivation is. You've got to know your purpose and why you're there. You've got to reflect on that and dig deep and push through that wall to keep going. If is safe, obviously. And that's the reason I turned around 3 times, because I knew I could go higher, but I didn't know if I could go lower. Yeah. And so you've got to know what the motivation is.
So next question is, let's talk about, you've been on the mountain now a lot. You've been in constant contact with operators all over the world. And I want to start with the guy that I happen to be going with, Madison Mountaineering. You've climbed with them. Tell me what to expect, Garrett. I've met him actually down in Antarctica last year. I was leading a team. He was coming down off that steep fixed line, that ice wall. And I think he looked at me like, who the hell are you? I was just a climber. But anyways, tell me with Garrett, I feel like I'm getting the best. One thing that was really important to me as I was evaluating other outfitters that lead expeditions up in the mountain is that I really wanted to be with the lead guy that has been on the mountain, and that he's not sitting in a tent on a radio talking to other people that are actually taking those guys up the mountain.
Yeah, so I summited with Garrett K2. I summited K2 with Garrett in 2014, and then I was with him in 2015 on. I was going to do Lhotse, and I was with his Everest team, and that's when the earthquake hit that destroyed our base camp and killed our camp doctor, and and a bunch of other people at base camp. Not to mention 9,000 people in Nepal.
Yeah.
So what you can expect from Garrett is a world-class guy, just a consummate gentleman. His attention to detail is outstanding. There's a whole new generation of guides that's now in the industry, in the high altitude mountaineering industry. Mike Hamill is one of them. Garrett is one of them. Ben Jones. But people like Mike and Garrett have spun off from companies like Alpine Ascents and International Mountain Guides to create their own companies. And so they're bringing in innovation, and they're bringing in a different cost structure and different options in order to meet the needs of a growing clientele out there. Garrett is very attuned into good food. You may gain weight on his expedition, which is a rarity these days.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, he will take this coronavirus very seriously. I spoke with him recently about this, and he says, yeah, they're going to take extra precautions in order, things like double washing all the dishes. They do that anyway, double boil all the water anyway, but they're going to probably double up on that. And you're going to have a hand washing station that's usual, but it's probably going to be even hotter water than normal. He's going to take every single extra precaution. When you get to base camp, you're going to go through a kind of a boot camp training. You'll recognize that from your NFL days. And you're going to go through practicing walking the ladders before you go up, and tying knots and clipping into the fixed rope. And he's going to leave nothing left to chance. His Sherpas are outstanding. He's been working with them for a number of years now under his own company, not to mention his pedigree back with the other companies.
Yep.
So, he's in that new class of guides that's really shaking it up, shaking the old school up.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to climb with him. I have climbed with Mike, I think 3 or 4 different times, and I really enjoy Mike too. But, I also, one of the things that has become a benefit for me is to mix it up. I've really found value of going with Alpine Ascents the last couple of years, and with Mike Hamill before that, then IMG, and now with Garrett, so I've really spread out the love around, and, each one seems to attract different people, a different kind of clientele. And I just love learning from different personalities on what they know and how they teach how to, really get around the mountain in a safe way. Yeah. So great news for me, great news for the mountain that we have a guy that really takes it professionally. So let's talk about because I've never done this, right? So I leave on the 31st of March and I land in Kathmandu via a few cities. But give me kind of like from beginning to end. It doesn't have to be every hour by any means, but just like, you land in Kathmandu, what can I expect? Because I know there's a trek just getting up to the mountain, and that takes a bit to do. And then once I'm on the mountain, how that goes.
Well, there's 4 parts to the overall Everest journey, if you will. There's the trip from home to Kathmandu to base camp. So that's number 1. Number 2 are your multiple rotations up and down the mountain or on adjacent peaks like Lobuche to get acclimatized. And then the 3rd is your summit push, and your 4th, and the most importantly, is to get back home by way of Kathmandu and getting home. So those are the 4 parts. So you're going to leave, and it'll take you 3 calendar days living in the U.S. to, by the time zones and stuff, to get to Kathmandu. You're going to step off of that plane on the tarmac, and it's going to be hot and humid. And you're going to see a monkey sitting on top of the airport, and all of a sudden you're going to get in this really crowded. You're going to go pick up your duffel bags off of this 1950s carousel, and you're going to send a prayer up in the world and do whatever you do to thank the gods of the universe for your duffel bag showing up. You know how that was down in Antarctica.
Yeah.
So then you ended up trekking. It'll take about Garrett typically takes 8 to 10 days to trek between. You'll fly to Lukla. Allegedly the most dangerous airport in the world, which is it's in the top 10, but it's not the most dangerous.
Yeah.
But it's got a short runway, and it dead ends into a mountain wall that the other end of the runway falls off 5,000 feet. So it is quite a ride. I think I read somewhere where he may be taking a helicopter this year instead of a fixed wing airplane, and that's becoming more and more common. Helicopters are slightly more safe. But anyway, so you go to Lukla, and then you're going to begin that trek. And I always tell people, if you ever get a chance to trek, make that trek or the Annapurna circuit do it. It will change your life. It is just stunning scenery day after day. You may start off being in snow and a little bit of cold, but as you get closer into the end of summertime around May 21st, it gets warmer and warmer. But, the scenery, staying in the tea houses, getting exposed to the chortens and the stupas, the kids are unbelievable. Take with you some writing pens and give it to them as gifts instead of money or chocolate like we used to do when I first went over in 97, because, they need school supplies. So when you see the kids, give them a little, pad and writing paper or a writing pen. You'll see old ladies spinning prayer wheels and walking along in their crimson robes. You'll see monks. Rhododendrons will be in the bloom as you enter the Sagarmatha National Park. It's just a stunning, stunning experience. And for me, a lot of people talk about they want to avoid that because you get sick. Well, the fact of the matter is that everybody catches some type of, Kunbu cough or upper respiratory something. That's just part of the thing. You get it, you get over it. Hopefully you get it early rather than later on. You get over it and you share it with the team. Everybody gets sick, everybody gets well together, and you keep on going. So the trek in is just a fantastic experience. You'll love it.
I had a buddy call me yesterday, Brian Hart, and his kid right now. You've got the Kumla cough. There you go. He's got about a 20-year-old kid that is he's been trekking through Nepal, and he was in some temple inside around Kathmandu, and a monkey literally climbed on his back and bit him, and he's got rabies or something now, and so they won't let him out of the country until he goes all through his vaccinations and this process, and then he's stuck there for a couple of weeks. So the last thing I want to do is get chomped on or attacked by a monkey. I
know a guy that got bit. There's a ton of dogs that they're feral dogs just all over the Khumbu. So and that's the number rule of thumb is just don't pet the dogs, especially even though they're cute. And you just want to pick up the little puppy and cuddle it, or the cat, the little kitty in the tea house. But try to avoid touching. This year I'd say avoid touching anything.
Oh, absolutely. Yesterday I went out and I bought a bunch of those surgical rubber, plastic, whatever they are, gloves that I'm just going to keep those on and wash my hands and have those disposable and chuck them out and put a new pair on all the time. I think that's the way to go.
Excellent idea.
Yeah. So I think when you said that when you fly in and you're going to land around 89,000 feet and then you're trekking up to advanced base camp, which is around 17,500.
Right. Base camp is 17,500. Right.
On the 4 parts, right? It's going through the Khumbu ice field to Camp 1, to Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4, and Camp 4 is in the death zone at 26,000 plus feet, and then you're from there. That's when you do the summit push up to 29,029 feet, and then obviously you want to go back down. But for you, what section did you find the most difficult? I know pushing to the top is always difficult, but if you just put it in terms of danger, obstacles, physical strength,